Welcome to the Inbound Logistics video podcast series presented by Inbound Logistics Magazine. Today, we're going to be looking at how to build a solid transportation solution for complex projects and specialized freight. Our guest today is Al Reisman, Executive Vice President, Specialized Freight Services for Landstar. And Al will be highlighting some of the challenges facing shippers in this niche, as well as an overview of a complex freight market where no 2 days are ever the same. Here's our host, Amy Roach.
Thank you. Great. Hi, Al. Welcome. So happy to have you join us for this Inbound Logistics video cast.
Good to be here, Amy. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. You have such tremendous experience with Landstar, overseeing complex and specialized freight. So I'm really excited for you to share your insights with our listeners today. We're going to talk a little bit about the market, kind of what's going on out there, what challenges and opportunities there are for specialized freight shippers today. And I think we'll talk a little bit about how shippers can work with solutions providers like Landstar to maximize and optimize their specialized freight operations. But let's jump in and start by kind of pinning down that exact definition of project and specialized logistics. I think it can mean different things to different people. So tell me a little bit, from the Landstar perspective, how do you define specialized complex freight at Landstar, and what kind of falls under that umbrella?
Yeah, to your point, it's very diverse from that standpoint. When it comes to project freight, it involves multiple shipments over a defined period of time. Usually it's a very short period of time. And in most cases, there is a defined pickup and delivery schedule that has to be met for ease of loading the first load or last load. So it actually is arranged at delivery in the time fashion that the load has to be put together at. In a lot of cases, we're meeting a crew at the job site. A crane can be involved. And in a lot of situations, one or more loads are overdimensional in specs. So when that comes to specialized freight, really the overdimensional comes into play there. And that usually involves anything that is out of gauge. So anything that's wider than 8 foot 6 inches tall, or as it sits on a trailer, it's taller than 13 foot 6 inches. And there are many length and weight characteristics involved, but those get a little tricky because it depends on the type of trailer that's being used, which state they're going to run. But all those parameters kind of play a role in specialized freight.
Makes sense. Yeah. So we're talking about all the tough stuff, the oversized, the big stuff, everything that's gives shippers headaches, and that's what you do to make it seamless, right?
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's hard, it's fun, right? So tell me a little bit, what are some of the key verticals that routinely need project logistics services? What are, some of the industries that come to you frequently?
Yeah, we definitely see it in the farm and ag industry, construction machinery, building materials, steel, aerospace, technology. We're heavily involved in pharma and sports entertainment when it comes to project freight. So it really runs the gamut of industries out there. And usually you're going to touch one of them along the way.
Yeah. What about some of the most unusual things? Can you give us any, kind of crazy items that you've hauled for shippers?
Yeah, we've hauled a lot of unique different things, a lot of museum pieces going to monuments. We'll haul aerospace equipment that is 24 foot wide. Some of the dimensions on some of the modular buildings we handle are 16 foot tall. But probably one of the most unique things we've handled, and quite the honor, I thought, was we've managed a few pieces from the Twin Towers for a 9/11 monument, and that was pretty unique.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I guess that's where we get our no 2 days are alike theme, right? It depends on the day. You can be shipping and hauling anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about the market. I know at Landstar, you watch the market very closely, so you can help your clients adapt and quickly manage whatever impacts are, coming down the pike from market changes. So just give us some insight. What are you seeing now? What are the market conditions like today for specialized freight?
Yeah, you can probably go nuts with all the stuff you look at and read, and certainly Landstar has their own stuff internally, and we look externally as well. But when it comes to the specialized group, it really has become a little bit different of a game, especially this year. The market in general and the industry has softened just because consumer spend has softened, as we all see from pandemic to today. But we're not seeing that happen on the specialized side. What we saw happening and starting to talk about in late 2022 were all these pent-up projects for construction and building that we're going to start taking place in 23. And we're starting to see that happen. And so demand for that type of equipment has become pretty strong.
Mhm.
You're seeing that stay pretty tight in that marketplace. We haven't seen the swings in a negative fashion as we've seen the total market. And so as we continue to talk to our customers and what they're looking for down the road, we see a little tightened market out there. You know,
Mhm.
capacity is tough. The training equipment is expensive. The drivers are unique and very specialized when it comes to managing some of this freight. And so, you know, as the aging population is out there in the driver world, it's even more so in the specialized category. So it becomes a little more challenging as business picks up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's get into some of the challenges, but I do want to say first, it's nice to hear a positive market situation overall, that you haven't seen as much of that downward cycle, as some of the other areas have. Nice to see that confidence coming back to be forward looking for a
Yep,
change.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Now you mentioned, sort of a downside of the high demand is, with this type of transportation and the limited pool of drivers, how is that translating into capacity concerns for shippers?
Yeah, I definitely think it's getting ahead of the game, and
Mhm.
sometimes not waiting too long to bring in someone like Landstar or their provider to sit down and talk about what they're looking to do, and if they're not familiar with that type of industry and what the demands may be and what they're up against, they could be caught a little bit short on getting the right capacity. Or in many cases, just setting up some false expectations for them if they don't understand what they're up against. So, it's really just not looking at the market and thinking that what they see out there is normal in the specialized world. It's not. Uh,
Mhm.
every load, as you mentioned earlier, is no 2 days are alike.
Yeah.
So definitely something that we expect and would like our customers to get with us ahead of time and just not be surprised by what's happening in the market. Uh,
Mhm.
construction is out there very heavily. Roads change, routes change. And so, just what you think you had lined up 2 weeks ago may be different today just because of construction.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I'm guessing that idea that, going it alone is maybe not the best approach for specialized logistics.
Yeah, we tell people, listen, you're going to, play with fire. You're going to get burned eventually.
Mhm.
They may get lucky, and a customer certainly may get lucky, and things may go well. But as we try to tell them, it's too much to chance. And certainly, in some factors, is trying to look at and see if they can save money, and maybe they do, or maybe they don't. But at the end of the game, we think it's potentially a loss for them if they do,
Mhm.
just because the opportunities for risk and problems are more severe without really knowing what you're up against. And so, certainly we are there to help our customers walk through anything they may have a question on. We'll guide them as best as we can. And if they use our services, that's fine. But we don't want to see anybody fail. And especially if there's a problem on the road and freight falls off a truck or, something more severe, nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, every shipment is challenging and every shipper, their goods are always important, but I think when we're talking about specialized, the risks are higher, the stakes are higher, the products are, delicate, more expensive. So I'd imagine it's even more so important that you're making sure you're making all the right decisions.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they're really a lot of cases they're one of a kind items, and or it's taken months or weeks certainly to manufacture. So to go at it again is very timely and consuming. But
Mhm.
it's also the aggravation factor, as we call it, the sleep and peace of the mind. You can go home and hopefully rest assured that your freight's going to move without any problem. But yeah, it's definitely a much more hands-on approach and a little more high category when it comes to overdimensional freight.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Uh,
So I guess what are some of their top needs when they do come, to partner with Landstar and other providers? What are shippers looking for from their partners, specifically for project logistics and specialized freight?
yeah, I mean, it's not over, I mean, I say overly complicated, but simply they just want their freight picked up and delivered on time without any sort of claim. And
Yeah.
but the concerns we have in that, or the areas we see, is more about the expectations that they set up ahead of time before bringing someone like Landstar involved. And so they may call us and tell us you have a 2-day delivery, and they've already set up a crane to be there. But
Mhm.
after they talk to us, realizing that the freight is out of gauge and can't transport in 2 days, and it's going to take another 3 or 4 days beyond that to get things lined up, permits or routes. So it's really that sort of things that we talk to a customer about getting ahead of that a little bit and seeing. So that becomes a little bit of a concern.
Yeah. What's the best way for them to do that, to come to you and to really try to work proactively from the beginning of the process to make sure that you're putting a plan in place that as much as possible can, kind of make for a seamless
Yeah,
shipment?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the value of is transporting the load from A to B. That's number one. But getting with them on a game plan and understanding what they're up against is probably as vital.
Hmm.
So they don't set up false expectations and things ahead of time and waste their time and money doing so if that's what they're going to do ahead of time. So certainly getting with us, and we'll see at times we'll get called in and we'll get the specs on a load. But really, someone's just reading the manufacturer specs or the build specs or the engineering deal, but they didn't realize there's some modifications that came up along the way. And so when they bring us in, we're able to go and measure and making sure things are in the right place.
Hmm.
We've also seen it where they've engineered something, maybe it's a one of a kind item, and they've not provided any way to secure that load
Right.
to the truck.
Sure.
And so again, that's where I think someone like us comes in handy, and bringing in our drivers that have just the knowledge and expertise to aid our customers on doing things before it becomes a problem or too late, I guess, in some cases.
Yeah, that driver piece is key. You have to make sure you have drivers who know how to handle this. This is not your everyday load. So
They're vital, absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. And what about, I imagine it's a similar answer, but for companies that say, hey, I already have transportation and logistics network that I go to regularly. Why is it a mistake to assume that you can use that same network for specialized or oversized freight?
Yeah, and we do see that the normal channel of logistics sometimes take place if they're not normally handling something specialized, and they more or less hand it off to their current provider. Again, that could work out well, and hopefully that provider has some experience in that industry. But if they don't, again, you're running the risk that there's a problem. And so, maybe they'll outsource it to somebody, and maybe they outsource it to someone that doesn't understand that business. But
Mhm.
we think you just run the risk. And so we encourage people to at least know who you're dealing with. Make sure that the people you're working with understand the industry. There is some experience in there. They have the industry expertise. They have the driver knowledge. They have the right equipment and the bandwidth to kind of manage things along the way. And if something does go wrong, that they're able to kind of step in and make it right. So working with someone like us, where we sort of have a network built in, we have a corporate entity that manages our specialized group and watches that stuff. So if
Yeah.
something does go wrong, a breakdown or whatever that may be, we can step in and hand that handled.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about in the case where obviously everyone wants to be proactive and we all love the idea of planning from the beginning, starting now for 2024 or however far in advance? What about for customers that have, a last minute need comes up or something changes or a deadline shifts? What's the best way for them to, approach this kind of a shipment in a truncated time frame?
And we're very well versed in that because that happens quite often. And
I'm sure
so,
you love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So again, the importance is try to get us, in as early as you can. But if something does occur last minute, or someone you work with does fall off, or you just don't have the comfort that they're managing it correctly, certainly give us a call. And we certainly have the bandwidth. Certainly we have great capacity. We have an abundance of capacity out there. We're one of the largest providers of specialized freight in North America. And so I think working with someone like Landstar that has that bandwidth and the expertise that can step in and source the capacity in a short timeline does come in handy. So
Mhm.
don't feel you're out if you've not planned ahead of time. Give us a call and we'll give you the honest outlook on what you're up against. So
Right. Yeah. Okay.
the game's not over if that happens.
Yeah. Even if it's not the ideal approach, you're going to get the strategy that's still going to work in the end.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. Tell me a little bit then from the provider side. Obviously, we've talked a lot about this, what the shippers are looking for. And, the main thing, again, like you said, is just, handling that load correctly, safely, securely. What are some of the other benefits that they're hoping to get? Cost benefits, service benefits? What are they looking for from companies like Landstar?
Yeah, certainly everyone's talking about cost, but for us, it's a lot of cost avoidance. We'll call that a potential
Yeah.
cost avoidance. So that really does come into play there. But really, you're getting the expertise. You're getting your freight picked up by somebody who's experienced and manages that freight regularly and knows that industry. Our agents will come in with our customers and they'll sit down with them and again look at the game plan. We've worked with engineers along the way to put in the right securement pieces along some equipment. We'll go to job sites for pickup and or delivery to make sure things are managed in a proper way, especially when you have large projects that have multiple shipments arriving at the same time, and you have to have a yard to drop them in. So various facets of expertise should get in there. But we talked about it earlier. Really the key here is the driver knowledge and what they have been through and what they experienced along the way. And it's just tremendous. So, we're fortunate to have just amazing operators, and, working with someone that has a strong safety and compliance program, very critical. You just want to make sure you're checking the boxes on that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So I think we talked a lot about this partnership aspect and how shippers really need to be working with providers like Landstar for these specialized shipments. Could you walk us through like a real world scenario? Kind of how do you work with the customer from start to finish to ensure that seamless execution? What does that look like? What's a cool scenario that fits on all these points?
Yeah. Probably the area that would come into mind is we do a lot of wind energy business. So in working with some of those manufacturers, we are really with them from the very beginning, setting up game plans, strategizing on where to deliver, what routes we're going to take. We are setting up meetings with local municipalities to set up to make sure there's any wires that need to be moved or any roads that have to be closed down. In some cases, we're bringing in construction equipment and paving equipment to crush some of the areas because we're going off-road. If you see these wind farms out there, they're miles off the road. So a lot of things have to happen. And the good or the bad is the engineers in that industry have become very smart, and they're now manufacturing some of these wind blades that are 200 feet long. So that's almost 70 yards. You imagine that in a football field, and that's going down the road. And so you really have to do a lot of planning ahead of time to kind of make those type of moves down the road and manage not only the blade, but the tower pieces that have to go along with it. And for each tower you see out there, there's 3 of those blades. And so we at times will send up drones to look at the roads to make sure the radiuses take place and really work every day with certainly the project managers on site, the construction company, the manufacturers, and all the capacity and the drivers to make sure we have a different plan every day to manage the route and manage the freight that takes place off the yard. In many cases, you have rain delays, wind delays, that take place. So really, it's the engineer and the project manager who really becomes our agent. It's critical. They become really a key part of that industry and a key part of that business.
Absolutely. So many unforeseen things, I imagine, that pop up in those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what would happen or could happen, but certainly, something that large going down the road and what could happen certainly, in front of you or behind you is just obviously most of them out of your hands.
Yeah. And the complexity too, like you mentioned, you're off-road, some of these areas, I know sometimes for these projects you're building, or not necessarily Landstar, but they're building roads just to access the areas where staging is happening. So really talking about complex stuff there.
Yeah, you got to be careful of the weather. Certainly if it gets too hot and you go to a paved road and it's soft concrete or it's blacktop, those trucks can fall through that quite fast, or at least sink, not fall. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, like we said at the beginning, the challenges are fun, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
But it makes it interesting. Yeah.
Great. All right. This has been such a great discussion. Thank you again for your time. And I'm glad you were able to join us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Amy. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I hope our listeners come away with a great understanding of all of this complexity that goes into these specialized moves and why it's so important to plan ahead and be proactive and work with experienced partners who can obviously help shippers to move these kind of loads safely and securely. So thank you again for your time. And it was great chatting with you.
Thank you. Be well and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.